Okay, so it's Jay and Joselito, and we just got done watching a advanced screening of Top Gun Maverick. And so this is our spoiler-free discussion about the movie. So how you doing tonight, Joselito?
Good. Thanks for inviting me to see the movie with you.
No problem at all. I was excited about seeing this movie. I seen the original one years ago, and I remember really enjoying it. But then you know how it is where you'll see a movie from a long time ago, and then you rewatch it, and then it's kind of like not as good as you remember, or it's cheesier than you remember. We were talking about stakes and stuff before, where the stakes wasn't as high as you remember, but it always feels so powerful and dramatic while you're watching it. But like I said, when you go revisit it, sometimes it's not quite what you remembered. And so when you have a movie that's been out a long time ago, and I don't think I was ever expecting a part two or a continuation to the story. It's like one of those kind of throwaway movies you just watched, like, in the 80s. And so they decided to do a part two. And since I guess Tom Cruise is on this streak of, doing his swan song, I guess, of all these movies like Mission Impossible, and he's just kind of going back through his just movies he wanted to revisit, I guess, before he retires or whatever. Or try to jump off a building and not
Exactly.
Before he pushes his luck too far with him doing his own stunts and stuff. So I guess he's figuring, let me hit up all the stuff I ever done before. The original movie was done by Tony Scott, who passed away a few years back. So they had a new director. And I believe this director is the same director who did the movie, the Tron Legacy movie.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think it's the same guy. I think he's an architect. It was his first career. So he has a straightforward style. But the thing about it is, with the Tron Legacy, I think his only issue was the story that went along with it. But it was like a beautifully shot movie. And this movie was beautifully shot as well.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so since we can't really say anything yet because of the embargo and it's not out yet, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on the movie?
Well, I was surprised how much I really liked the movie. And again, Jason, when I mentioned to you after the movie that I felt like the stakes in this were higher than in the original, that's always the case where when the movie first comes out, like the original Top Gun, where centuries ago or decades ago, and then when you see it in the present, it's not gonna seem as good. But then, in order to have a Top Gun 2, there has to be a Top Gun 1 to establish that world in the first place. And Top Gun 1, for the time, was a great movie, and it's still an entertaining movie. But definitely, the second movie, like, I think could stand alone from the first movie. Meaning that if you had never seen the first movie, you don't need to see the first movie to enjoy this second movie, which is one of the things I liked about this movie.
That's true, because they did fill in the gaps. And with these kind of movies, normally filled with a lot of flashbacks, and that happens, which is, what normally happens in movies like this. But I didn't feel like they relied on them. And I like you said, even if you didn't see it before, but if you have seen the movies before, even we that, enjoyed the first movie could use a reminder just to kind of give you the tone of what's going on, the stakes, and the way they're connected to the past and things like that. Sometimes there are callbacks to things, and you need that, that little reminder.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they put just enough of the flashback of the past to give the audience the information, but they didn't rely too, like what you're saying, they didn't rely too much on it. They gave enough information where, okay, so if you never saw the first one, okay, this is, harkening back to the events of the first movie, but this is a new story. And then, but the memories of the old movie or the original movie are affecting, the present of this movie,
right,
and what's going to happen with the characters. But it doesn't totally rely on the past, but it is still there, right, to affect the characters in the present.
Yeah, I think they did a good job of paying homage to the original movie without duplicating the same thing, because sometimes when a part two is made, especially with this much far space in between, what you get is the original movie again with a bigger budget, and you're just repeating the same thing over again, and you don't feel like you really get anything new but these, placeholder people that supposed to remind you of this person or that person, but you don't quite connect to them the same way, and so you feel like you're just kind of like going through the motions. But the way they did the new characters I thought was cool. Even though it was quick, you still got a sense of who you were dealing with. And even though they reminded you of other characters possibly, they still had their own kind of thing, It was just more than just an archetype. It was like, okay, this is about this person. And this person got this way about going about things. And so I thought that was really cool to pull that off, and that this movie didn't feel like a throwaway. It didn't feel like it was a cash grab trying to, play off nostalgia and, and get your money. It felt like it was a thought out story that kind of made sense. And even though some of it was kind of out there, it was still believable within the world that they made. One thing I will say, which kind of surprised me, was the trailer. When I saw a trailer for this, I think it gave away plot point on the movie I think they shouldn't have shown in the trailer. And they could have done without that thing. But even though they showed it and I knew about it going in, it didn't hamper anything. But I kind of wish I didn't know that. I wish I would have discovered this thing as they kind of figured it out. But even with knowing some of the plot of what was going on, I still thought it was very enjoyable. I thought it was shot beautifully. I know we were kind of joking around when we were talking about how we know that, Tom Cruise is probably doing all his stunts, all his flying and stuff.
Yes.
And so that was cool. And like I said, we saw some new faces, some familiar faces. We saw some old faces, which was really cool. I liked how they pulled back as much as they could without being too much of an anchor, because sometimes when you do throwback stuff and you bringing in all these characters from the past, sometimes that could hinder the current story because you're more focused on the people you want to see, but you don't get a lot of them, right? So they'll present somebody that you like, and then they just kind of snatch them away, and you're just like, I'm left with these new characters I don't know or care about.
Yeah.
And so they did really well with not overdoing that.
Yes.
You still care about the old characters, but you care about the new ones too.
Yeah, that's and I'll say this about if this is Tom Cruise's swan song in terms of his career in movies, is that Tom Cruise, and whatever his religion aside and whatever kookiness that might be, I will say that I respect Tom Cruise in that I see that he, the whole thing with he does his own stunts. Mm-hmm. But aside from that, we both know that he probably has a hand in a lot of the movies that he's in now in terms of like also the plot.
Yeah.
And what I will say about Tom Cruise is the movies he's in now, he really tries to make the stories compelling, and he really tries to make the characters like you said, they're not throwaway characters. These new characters in this new Top Gun, like they do just enough where they tell you what the characters are like, but they don't like flood you with too much of whatever their drama is. Mm-hmm. So you're stuck in their drama. They just present you, this is the characters, and then you end up actually like becoming attached to the characters, and it's not a forced. I felt like it wasn't forced. Mm-hmm. Like you just naturally do whatever they did with the characterization and how the actors and actresses acted. They became very like likable characters where you actually like were invested in what was going to happen to those characters, which is like it's a hard thing to do with like, especially with the sequel movies, where if you have new characters, it's hard to like have that where you're going to be invested in the new characters, because sometimes they overdo it, or they sometimes make those new characters somehow better than the original characters. Right. So for the people who were part of the original, they resent the new characters because they feel like they're trying to replace the new, but they didn't. They merged them together, so respectfully, and both the old and the new characters were still like, on equal footing in terms of the audience probably engaging with them.
That's a great point, because sometimes also, especially if it's a franchise that you love, you got this competition going in your head.
Star Wars.
Right, you're trying to fight against what you know or knew and saw before against what they're trying to give you now.
Yes.
And I thought it was pretty cool where I didn't really have that fight. Like I said, I think everybody was kind of done in a respectful way, which I thought was cool. I think that they played into certain things that they have no control over now. They was able to fold that into the story, which was cool. I thought the story had heart. I thought that it had great action. I thought that even though you know how these movies normally go, I questioned how certain things are going to happen, which is surprising because usually, many movies as we've seen, we shouldn't be surprised about anything. It shouldn't have been tense. It shouldn't have been, but I just kind of didn't know how it was going to go. I was very concerned on certain parts, like, would they do that? And I really didn't know.
Yeah, this was interesting because, like, in for a lot of actors who like are in the twilight, what tends to happen, I noticed in, like, I'll give an example, like, say, like some Liam Neeson movies, which are not bad movies, but a lot of times it could easily have gone, and obviously I'm not going to give anything away, but what this movie did, like, it could have easily been like all about Tom Cruise's character,
right?
But it balances out where the new characters, like, also get their flowers and shine too, as well as Tom Cruise. It wasn't just all about Tom Cruise's character. It also focused on the new character. It balanced it out well, where it wasn't just about Tom Cruise and whatever happens with the plot, and it's all just focused on Tom Cruise. No, Tom Cruise's character is important, but so were the other characters as well. I was surprised how well they did that. They integrated it really well, and I'm curious how much. I'm sure, like a lot of say, that Tom Cruise really must probably had a lot of say in making the plot this way, where to balance out the characters so that it felt like a well-rounded movie.
Yeah, because there was some really touching scenes, and he was kind of acting his butt off on certain scenes too. And also, even though he didn't look as old as you would expect him to be, I thought it was neat how he wasn't trying to pretend to be young either. Yes. And I thought that was very cool to see, because sometimes you have somebody, their hair is sprayed black and they try to act like, oh, I'm so young, and just show certain shots from certain angles. He wasn't trying to pretend to be. He was supposed to be the old dude in the situation.
Yeah. And obviously, I'm not going to give it away, but there's that one scene where they could have easily been overdone, but because and we joked about it during the thing, because of his age, they did it in a more like reserved, low-key way, but they could have easily tried to exaggerate it and tried to make him seem younger than he really was in that scene, with the other person that was with him in that scene. But they didn't. They were real about his age and not trying to try to make it seem like he was all younger and vigorous than he really was.
Yeah,
that's the word.
Yeah, and I will say too, and this is from the you see them in the trailer, so they're in there. But Jennifer Connelly and Miles Teller, it's interesting. I hear different things about Miles Teller as far as like the actor and the person, how he could be interesting and kind of different. But I always enjoy him in films. So whatever he is in real life, when he's in the films, I really do enjoy him, be it whatever kind of character he's playing. But he always seemed to come off as very everyman and kind of something else going on behind the eyes, even though like when you see him in interviews and stuff, he always seemed kind of like jerkish or whatnot.
Yeah,
but I really enjoyed him.
I think this movie will definitely help him. And the weird thing is I always thought early on in his career, I always thought that he was like a poor man's Shia LaBeouf.
Okay.
In terms of Shia LaBeouf is like, I don't know, I think Shia, I'm not keeping up with his career, but I'm sure he's still doing stuff. But in terms of major movies, I feel like Shia has kind of been like whatever his, real life and how he acts and to talk about how he is in real life, it's not necessarily positive.
Right.
But with Teller, I think this movie will definitely cement him as someone that could kind of play the, because he's decent looking, but he never came off to me as like the lead. Until this movie, he always seemed to be more of just the awkward guy. Like he's like
the smart aleck friend.
Yes, but he's not necessarily like the main movie
leading man type.
Yeah, guy. Leading man, where you could have your shirt. Sure. I mean, I'm sure I'm not giving that away. Where Top Gun, just like in the first one, they always will have a scene where they're
playing volleyball
and just like and just like these chiseled bodies. That's all part of the whole trope of like the military man being like the ultimate physical specimen.
And it's funny that they did that without it being too corny. Like we knew what was going, we knew what was happening when we seen it, and they showed that in the trailer.
But I noticed in those shots when they did, and I think the way they were able to pull that off is it was mostly in shadows, meaning like unlike the first one, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you have to have a first one to have a second one. The first one was clearly just like meant to be eye candy for whoever, women or whoever's into watching chiseled men that are all like on a beach playing volleyball.
Right.
This one, it shows it, but it doesn't do enough where it, like in the first one where they're trying to like just do it for the sake of a throwaway scene to get people who are into that excited about seeing men like with their shirts off type of thing.
And this didn't feel, like you said, it didn't feel like it was supposed to be like this money shot kind of thing. It was almost like the way it was shot, I was actually trying to keep up with what they were doing with the game and stuff.
Yeah.
I was more seeing them kind of connect.
And I think it fulfilled the purpose where, remember what Tom Cruise had said, what that was for. I think it really was meant for that, and not, like you said, like just a cheap throwaway just to try to get, female or whoever is into watching. It was just done just enough where you can get excited, but it's actually I think it's actually a necessary scene. Yes. To show it wasn't.
It had purpose. It wasn't just.
It wasn't sexual, if that's the right term. Not a bad thing, but like I said, that's the way it was done in the first movie versus the second movie. It was done in a different way.
Yeah, and then Jennifer Connelly, she still looks beautiful. It was nice to see her in this kind of role. Yeah, because she's been around for so long, and to see her, she really fit in there. If I remember correctly, she's not in the first one, but I know it was an issue with the original chick that was in the first one. She didn't come back, and there was this thing where they were saying like, they don't want to have older women and they don't get roles anymore, stuff like that. So I thought it was very interesting that they got Jennifer Connelly, which is an older woman. And so I think sometimes it would be cool to see the original woman, but then also it's kind of like in real life, relationships change and stuff. And sometimes if it was different, if it's like, sometimes they have like interchangeable women. Sometimes every time you see the guy come back to part 5, it's always a new woman each time, like in a Bond movie or something like that. This didn't feel like that. So if they would have got Tom Cruise with this young woman or something like that, and that's kind of messy.
No.
You trying to keep out older women, but it wasn't that. He had an older woman as well that fit his age.
And I think with the first movie, because I think I talked to you about it, like, and I had asked you during the movie, like, how old Jennifer Connelly was, because I was curious, because Kelly McGillis was an attractive actress, right? So it kind of makes sense. But I think it also makes sense in the sense that Maverick, when in his younger years, would have probably been going after like the Kelly McGillis type of, and Jennifer Connelly would be more like, obviously she was attractive when she was younger,
right? But
she probably wouldn't have been his type at that younger, more brash age.
That's a good point.
And it makes more sense that as he gets older, then Jennifer Connelly, who oddly enough, in my opinion, she's a good actress.
Right.
But in my opinion, when she was younger, she was decent, but like in her movies, I felt like she didn't really stand, like she was just a pretty face. Now when I see her in movies, I'm actually seeing like she's a good actress.
Right.
And she's still attractive, but not like it's a more like somber, but it's just still pretty. Whereas in the earlier movies when she was younger, I didn't necessarily think she stood out. She just was very kind of like a Sherilyn Fenn, like attractive, but just there wasn't enough. And maybe that could have also been the reason, because Kelly McGillis, when she was younger, aside from her how beautiful she was, she just seemed more like assertive. Like I think Jennifer Connelly's character just wouldn't have worked at that younger thing. It works now because as he gets older, it's going to be more tempered now.
And then also the way Jennifer Connelly was introduced, like in movies like Labyrinth and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So she was always like the little girl, the girl next door kind of thing, even though she's a great actress.
And also too, I think, again, not obviously the elephant in the room, but like even like, remember Meg Ryan was in the original one. And what is the thing about Meg Ryan and Kelly McGillis? They both have that look, whether or not it's a stereotype where naval men may be more attracted to that type of woman, like the blonde look, versus Jennifer Connelly's look, like I said, may not have like fit that, whatever that, during that time, whatever that stereotype of what they deem is to be attractive for a woman.
Yeah. So this kind of shows the difference between the 80s and today too, which is very interesting because really they remade the 80s movies in the 2000s, and even though it's similar, because the thing about it is when watching this movie, it made me think like that's how I feel about the first movie, even though the first movie is not that.
Yeah.
And which I think is pretty neat. What did you think of the fact that this movie should have came out like a year or two ago? Do you think it lost any steam, or do you think, you know how timing is very important, especially for movies, books, stories, art, and things like that. And so we know that this is off due to, you know, COVID and things like that. And this movie's been pushed back. And so we're getting it now. Do you think it's a good time for it to be coming out now? Do you think we're ready for it?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect time because right now we're kind of in a weird space. Like I was talking about it to you earlier before we saw the movie about there's kind of not really a lot of movies right now. There are movies here and there, I think like with Doctor Strange, usually obviously there's the blockbuster movies it would compete against, but there really isn't anything. So I think it's actually not a bad time for it because we're kind of in a weird space where I don't think there's a lot of movies that are going to compete with this. Because I think that Doctor Strange, as entertaining as it is, I think it's a disappointing movie. So, and I think a lot of audience might feel that way. So I don't think it's going to affect this movie. In fact, I think a lot of people will watch this movie because of that. It's a dead time right now. I just feel like there aren't any competing movies against this one right now.
Yeah, the movie selection has been very slim, and it's been hit or miss because some of the stuff has been, you know, done years ago and it's just releasing, and some of it's just been put together, but in a different kind of way due to constraints from filming and shooting and stuff like that. So a lot of these movies seem compromised. But this one felt like it was a clear vision that was kind of executed, and it came off nicely. It didn't feel like, that felt like this was reshot, or they pulled this part out and changed this. It didn't feel like it was really messed with. It seemed like it was a strong idea, and they did it, and they presented it.
It felt like going back to when Michael Bay, like the old school type
Jerry Bruckheimer movies.
Yeah, like the blockbuster, we haven't really had a movie like that. Like I said, using the Doctor Strange movie, which is, you know, it's a good movie, but I don't view it like a blockbuster movie. It's just a movie that a lot of people will watch because it's kind of riding on the coattails of what Marvel had established with Avengers. And it's just, meaning what I'm saying is I think that this Top Gun movie, the second one, would do well regardless of whatever time, even if it had if they released it the year before, it still would have, I think it would have done well, just like I predict it's going to do well now as well, because it uses the formula of the Michael Bay style blockbuster, but it also adds a little bit of depth to the thing where, like I said, this is what Star Wars should have done, because Star Wars screwed the pooch in terms of like introducing the new characters, but they've relegated the old characters to like as if they're not important. It was a bait and switch in my opinion. The Star Wars was, you know, bringing in the old people, the nostalgic people, but then you're really aiming it towards your new audience. The Top Gun movie doesn't do this. It respects both the old and the new audience, which is why I think this movie will really do well.
They did that well with the cast. They did that well with the music. It definitely had a good vibe. It reminded me. They even though they said it did a memoriam to Tony Scott, who directed the first one, and he was supposed to direct this one too, but he ended up passing before they got a chance to. And so this director did a good job of having that kind of vibe. You know, it's just like when you're seeing them take off and things and flying and doing all these moves and stuff, you could feel it. And it just it really makes you feel like you're part of the crew. You feel like it has a great way of kind of pulling you into it. So I got two questions for you. One, would you see it again? And two, would you suggest it to others to watch?
Yes, I would definitely see it again.
Okay.
And I would definitely recommend it for people to watch. This is a movie where you have to watch it on the big screen theater and not at home. You
Yeah.
have to experience, because the shots that they have and all this, and we were lucky enough to see it like on an IMAX screen, which is amazing. But if possible, for those that want to see it, you have to watch it on the biggest screen possible. That's the type of movie it is, because it's not going to be the same. You'll still enjoy it if you watch it on your TV, but you got to experience the old school blockbuster type, with the noise, the soundtrack, the scenes, and just like the loud music. It just, it's harkening back to like pre-COVID, what blockbuster movies used to be like.
Right. So I would definitely see it again. I will see it again. And I would definitely suggest it to others, especially if you enjoyed the first one. I think you're going to love this one. I think if you didn't see the first one, you would still love this one. And you could even watch it without even watching the first one, even though it doesn't hurt to brush up. The story's compelling. The action is wonderful. The acting is cool. It's a throwback vibe kind of movie, but modern, which is, hard to do. But this was definitely in capable hands. Like you said before, I'm sure Tom Cruise had a lot to do with this, because with his movies and stuff he's been doing lately, he's been choosing and working with the same directors over and over again. Same thing with the writers and things. So he has a handful of folks that he's dealing with when he's doing these movies, and these movies have been some of the strongest stuff he's been doing.
Yeah, and these recent movies he's been doing, it's like I'm just getting a different perspective and respect for him, because I really feel that he really respects the audience and tries to make the movies he's in now. He really tries to respect the audience and doesn't just try to make it about glorifying the characters.
Right.
He really tries to make it where all the other characters are compelling as well, and it's not all about him.
It's interesting. One, I just saw the new trailer for the new Mission Impossible movie that's coming out. The last one's going to be into 2 parts. So I saw a trailer for part 1 for the final movie, which I'm looking forward to. But it's funny what you said about him kind of being selfless in a way and kind of being about the bigger picture. You know who else did this not too long ago, which I thought was pretty neat, was Sylvester Stallone.
Oh,
He kind of did the same thing. He did Rambo. He did Expendables. So all these movies seem like he did Rocky.
Yeah.
He did the last Rocky. So he was kind of making his victory laps on some of his old franchises that he did before, and was including more people and giving us deeper story and stuff like that. So this is kind of neat when you see it done like that. But I think he was the first person I saw do that in a while, where it's just like, where did this Rocky come up from 30 years later? Where did this Rambo movie come up 30 years later? Okay, and Expendables, he getting all his buddies from all the different action films and he pulled them together, and everybody's kind of like coming out of retirement, and they're the badass of the, they're the heroes of the movies. And it was just neat to see. I love it. And they're complaining about their back or shoulders or something. They having issues, and I love it, but it's not stopping them from taking care of business. And it's just nice to see.
It definitely gives, because if you remember, there was that point where I can't remember which movie it was, where Tom Cruise's movie, where they had to kind of shut down for a short period of time. And he had supposedly that viral thing where he went on a rant and I can't remember who he was angry at. And obviously at the time, people were probably making fun of him. But then when I've seen his recent movies, and I think he's coming from the perspective of, and this is where you can maybe understand why he went into the rant, because of all the COVID stuff. That has severely affected, he brought it up too. It was part of his rant, where this is a serious thing, because not being able to film the old way, that's like a lot of jobs that get affected. And I think he generally, like, aside from, being in the movie himself and being the main guy, I think he also views this type of filmmaking as like going back to the way it used to be, where it actually employs a lot of people. I think he generally, like, not just for himself, but he views it as a way for people to be able to have jobs. Because in the current environment, you're not really going to have a lot of these big budget things where you can have like a big crew of people and everybody has like a piece of the pie. It's more smaller. It's a smaller footprint now with movies a lot of time, because of obviously budget and but he's still trying to maintain that old school way where you have a big budget movie, and not just because of the story and the actors, but also because it allows employment for a lot of people, because that's what it is with big budget. You have a lot of hands that are involved in the actual creation of the movie.
Yeah, and then you have somebody who has a vision. Sometimes you're very passionate to make sure things go all right, because other people that might be on your team may not have the same passion. They may not see it like that. Maybe they just trying to, maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe they just not taking it as serious. But when you're the leader and you're trying to make sure you get something done and you're the head of something, you take it personally. So even when I heard that rant, I didn't take it as a bad thing. I took it as, it's probably somebody just probably messing around, and it's just like, what this is going to cost us. Because sometimes people need to get kind of shaken out of their comfort when it's big things that are at stake. And like you say, even though it's like a popcorn movie, that's people's livelihoods.
Yes.
And so something as little as somebody being sick on set could shut everything down. And so for him wanting everything to be pulled together so they could work it out, and also to be an example and to prove that it could be done during this time, I thought it was pretty cool. But this was very enjoyable. I really enjoy it, and I can't wait to see it again. So Joselito, do you have any last words for us?
Just definitely, once you can watch this movie, go watch it, and make sure to watch it on the biggest screen possible. It's a great movie.
Right on. I agree. And we'll also be back to do a spoiler-filled review, so we can kind of deep dive and talk about some of the stuff we can talk about right now. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation with you as well. And so that was Jay and Joselito. Until next time, peace.
Peace out.